My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am, or perhaps more accurately was, considered a woman of impeccable taste and quiet fortitude. At 52, I thought I had navigated the complexities of life with a certain degree of grace. 17 years spent building a respected art advisory business, followed by 26 years of marriage to Richard Vance, supporting his burgeoning architectural firm, raising our bright, beautiful daughter, Claire. Our life, curated like one of the museum exhibitions I used to oversee, appeared successful, stable, enviable, especially here in the refined circles of Boston. Which is why the scene unfolding around me today, in the elegantly appointed private dining room of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, felt like a particularly vulgar piece of performance art. We were gathered, ostensibly, to celebrate Claire's graduation summa cum laude, with a degree in art history from Boston University. Around 50 friends and family members filled the room, the air thick with the scent of expensive lilies and congratulatory champagne. Claire, seated beside me, glowed, her eyes bright, her future seemingly as polished and promising as the silverware before us. I sat beside her, playing the role I'd perfected over decades: the proud mother, the supportive wife, elegant and composed, my heart swelling with genuine pride for my daughter's achievement. Richard, my husband, sat across from me, holding court, accepting congratulations on Claire's success as if it were solely a reflection of his own. He looked distinguished, as always, in his bespoke Italian suit, charming the guests with anecdotes about his latest architectural project, a man entirely comfortable at the center of attention. Too comfortable, perhaps. I watched him, maintaining my serene smile, while beneath the surface a cold, hard knot of knowledge tightened in my chest. Knowledge I'd carried, silently, meticulously for the past 6 months. The main course plates were cleared, dessert was served, exquisite little raspberry tarts, and the champagne flutes were refilled. Richard stood up, tapping his glass lightly with a spoon. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to him, expecting the traditional proud father's toast. He raised his glass, a practiced smile playing on his lips. To Claire, he began, his voice smooth, resonant. To her hard work, her brilliance, her bright future. Polite applause followed. He let it die down, then took a deliberate sip of champagne, his eyes scanning the room before landing with calculated impact on me. And, he continued, his smile hardening almost imperceptibly, to new beginnings. A few people frowned slightly, puzzled by the shift in tone. As Claire embarks on her own journey, Richard announced, his voice now carrying a different edge, cool and decisive, I too have decided it's time for a change, a new chapter. Therefore, I want to announce today, amongst family and friends, that I have decided to start a new life. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Without Eleanor. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Silverware clattered to a stop mid-air. Someone behind me gasped audibly. Every single eye in the room swiveled from Richard's composed face to mine, waiting for the tears, the accusations, the predictable, messy drama of a publicly discarded wife. Claire beside me went utterly still, her face paling, her graduation cap suddenly looking like a ridiculously tragic crown. Richard remained standing, his glass held steady now, a faint, almost challenging glint in his eyes, daring me to react, daring me to crumble according to his script. But I didn't. Years of curating exhibitions, negotiating with difficult artists, and maintaining composure in high-stakes gallery openings had taught me something about managing public perception, about holding steady when the ground shifts beneath you, and besides, I had been preparing for this scene, or some version of it, for 6 long months. His announcement wasn't a shock. It was merely the cue I'd been waiting for. So I smiled. Not a brittle, forced smile, but a calm, almost serene one, the kind that unnerves people expecting hysterics. I saw Richard take an involuntary half-step back, his confidence faltering slightly at my unexpected composure. I gently placed my linen napkin beside my untouched raspberry tart. I stood up slowly, deliberately. From my elegant clutch purse, a birthday gift from Richard 2 years ago, likely paid for with funds diverted elsewhere. I retrieved a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. I held it for a moment, then walked calmly around the table and placed it directly in front of Richard's plate, as if delivering the check after a particularly unsatisfactory meal. Actually, Richard, I said, my voice steady, clear, carrying easily through the stunned silence, loud enough for everyone at the surrounding tables to hear distinctly. This is for you, a graduation gift of sorts. From me. He stared at the envelope as if it might contain a snake. Claire looked from the envelope to me, her eyes wide with confusion and dawning apprehension. My mother-in-law, seated nearby, narrowed her eyes suspiciously. I leaned down towards my daughter, then, ignoring the collective held breath of the room, ignoring Richard staring dumbly at the envelope, I kissed Claire's forehead gently. I am so incredibly proud of you today, sweetheart, I whispered, just for her. This is your day. Don't let anyone steal its joy, understand? She nodded mutely, tears finally brimming in her eyes. I straightened up and let my gaze sweep across the familiar faces watching me. Cousins, old friends, Richard's business associates, people who had attended our dinner parties, celebrated our anniversaries, accepted our hospitality for years. Many now avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by their dessert plates, because they knew, or suspected. The whispers about Richard and Jessica, his bright young intern, nearly 20 years his junior, had been circulating quietly for months. They just hadn't expected the implosion to happen quite so publicly, or for me to be the one holding the detonator. The memory flashed. 6 months ago, a cold January evening, reviewing our year-end joint credit card statements online while Richard was away on another supposed client trip to New York. I wasn't looking for anything, just doing routine financial tidying. But the charges leaped out. High-end dinners for two at restaurants I'd never been to, weekend stays at boutique hotels I'd only read about, a shockingly expensive purchase from Tiffany & Co. that certainly wasn't for me. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Later that week, tidying Richard's study, I'd picked up the shared family iPad he often left lying around. The screen lit up, displaying an open message thread to Jessica Noir, filled with intimate plans, declarations of love, promises of a future together once he handled the Eleanor situation, promises of a beach house, of freedom. The casual cruelty of it, the years of deception it implied, shattered the carefully curated image of my marriage. That night, after the initial wave of shock and heartbreak subsided, something else took its place. A cold, clear anger and resolve. I remembered the prenuptial agreement Richard had insisted upon 26 years ago, back when my family's old Boston money and my successful gallery career significantly outweighed his status as a promising but still struggling young architect. He'd wanted to protect his future earnings, his potential. I'd been hurt but agreed, signing the document drafted by his high-powered lawyers. I hadn't looked at it since. Retrieving it from the dusty safe in our home office, my hands shaking slightly, I found the clause I vaguely remembered. Clause 14, infidelity. In the event that either party is found to have committed adultery, substantiated by clear evidence, it read, said party shall forfeit claims to the majority of marital assets acquired after the date of marriage, including primary residence, shared investments, and retirement accounts, with disposition favoring the injured party. He had insisted on it to protect himself. Now, ironically, it was my shield and my sword. The next day, I met with Diane Holloway, a top divorce attorney whose discretion and sharp tactics were legendary. I laid out the evidence, the credit card statements, screenshots of the messages. Diane barely blinked. Ironclad, she declared after reviewing the prenup. Clause 14 is unambiguous. The key is irrefutable proof of the affair. She recommended hiring a private investigator. Marco, my brother's old college friend, was discreet, efficient. Within weeks, he delivered the photos. Richard and Jessica, hand in hand, entering a Soho hotel, sharing intimate dinners, kissing openly on a park bench during one of his business trips. For months, I played the part of the oblivious wife, meticulously gathering evidence, working with Diane to prepare the divorce petition, the asset lists, the invocation of Clause 14. Waiting for Richard to make his move, Knowing his arrogance, his desire for public control would likely lead him to choose a moment like this, Claire's graduation, to announce his triumphant departure. He wanted to be the one to end it, to control the narrative. He had no idea the narrative had already been written by him in Clause 14 years ago. Now, standing in the silent restaurant, the cream envelope lying accusingly on the table before him, Richard finally seemed to grasp the shift in power. Please, everyone, I said, my voice calm, gracious, addressing the room. Do enjoy the rest of the party. Celebrate Claire. Have a wonderful afternoon. Without waiting for a reaction, without looking at Richard again, I turned and walked towards the exit, my heels clicking firmly on the marble floor. The sound echoed in the stunned silence like a final judgment. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The real explosion, I knew, would happen the moment Richard finally opened that envelope. The heavy oak door of the restaurant clicked shut behind me, muffling the stunned silence and rising whispers within the private dining room. I didn't pause, didn't look back. My heels clicked rhythmically on the cool marble floor of the hotel lobby, a steady beat against the frantic pounding in my chest. I walked with my head held high, spine straight, focusing on the exit, on the promise of the crisp Boston air outside. Shame, the emotion Richard and his mother likely expected me to be drowning in, felt distant, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I had just reached the revolving doors when I heard it, the dining room door crashing open, followed by Richard's voice, no longer smooth and controlled, but sharp with panic. Eleanor, wait! What the hell are you doing? Talk to me! His footsteps pounded urgently behind me on the marble. I didn't slow down. Let him chase. Let him feel for once the frantic desperation of losing control. He caught up to me just as I pushed through the revolving door onto the sidewalk, grabbing my upper arm, spinning me around to face him. His face was flushed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and disbelief. He waved the cream-colored envelope I'd left him, crumpled now in his fist. What is this? He demanded, his voice loud enough to draw glances from a couple walking past. Divorce petition? Adultery claims? Hidden assets? Are you insane? I looked at him calmly, extracting my arm from his grasp. The man I had loved, supported, built a life with for 26 years. The man who, just minutes ago, had publicly discarded me like a piece of outdated furniture in front of our daughter, our family, his colleagues. The man now clutching evidence of his own betrayal like a drowning man grasping at wreckage. It's exactly what it looks like, Richard, I said, my voice steady, cool. Our prenuptial agreement. Specifically, Clause 14. You remember, don't you? The one you insisted upon all those years ago when my family's name carried more weight than yours, when my gallery prospects looked brighter than your fledgling architectural firm? He stared at me blankly for a second, then scoffed. That thing? That was over 2 decades ago. It's meaningless now. Invalid. Actually, I replied, allowing a small, tight smile. It's not. Clause 17 explicitly states it remains valid throughout the duration of the marriage and any subsequent dissolution proceedings. No expiration date. Your lawyers were very thorough. I paused, letting it sink in. And Clause 14? The infidelity clause? The one outlining forfeiture of marital assets upon substantiated proof of adultery? It's quite comprehensive. His eyes widened further as understanding and sheer panic began to dawn. Substantiated proof? You have no proof. That's slander. Oh, Richard, I sighed, almost pitying his desperate denial. I gestured towards the crumpled papers still clutched in his hand. Check Exhibit B. Ask your junior architect, Jessica, about the charges at the Carlisle in New York last March, or the spa weekend in the Berkshires in December. Or perhaps, I added, watching the color drain from his face, review the rather clear photographs taken by a Mr. Marco outside that charming boutique hotel in Soho just last month. He was very thorough. Excellent composition, really. He looked down at the papers again, then back at me, his arrogance finally shattering, replaced by raw, sputtering disbelief. Marco, you hired a private investigator? A prudent measure, I said simply. When one suspects Clause 14 might become relevant? You can't do this. Wait, he choked out, sounding winded. The house, my retirement, the firm's investment account. That's our money. Precisely, I agreed calmly. Our marital assets, acquired after the date of marriage. And according to the agreement you drafted and insisted upon, substantiated infidelity triggers a rather specific division of those assets. I recited the terms I now knew by heart, the terms Diane Holloway and I had gone over meticulously. The primary residence, your share of the joint investment portfolio, the bulk of the retirement funds accumulated during the marriage, forfeited to the injured party, which, thanks to your very public announcement minutes ago and the contents of that envelope, is quite clearly me. I allowed myself another small, cold smile. The assets I brought into the marriage, my premarital holdings, my inheritance from my father, those, of course, remain mine, as stipulated in the clauses you added for your protection back then. He stared at me, utterly speechless now, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. The prenup he'd designed to protect himself from me years ago had just become the instrument of his own financial ruin, triggered by his own betrayal. He tried a different tack, his voice suddenly pleading. Eleanor, listen, Jessica. It was a mistake. Stress from work. A stupid midlife crisis. It meant nothing. We can fix this. Don't do this, Ellie, please. Ellie. He hadn't called me that in years. The intimacy felt grotesque now. A mistake doesn't involve 18 months of calculated deception, Richard, I said flatly. It doesn't involve secret trips, hidden bills, lies told to your wife and daughter. Those are choices. You made yours. Now you live with them. Just then, the sleek black car service I'd discreetly booked earlier pulled up to the curb beside us. The driver, professional and impassive, stepped out and opened the rear door for me. I pulled my arm fully free from Richard's now limp grasp. My lawyer, Miss Holloway, will be in touch with yours, assuming you still have one after this one, regarding the formal petition and the asset division schedule, I stated, my voice cool and final. Have a good life, Richard. Or perhaps more accurately, the life you've earned. I slid into the back seat of the car, the door closing with a soft, decisive click. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, I glanced back through the tinted window. Richard stood frozen on the sidewalk, the crumpled envelope still in his hand, staring after the car with a look of utter, bewildered devastation. He looked small, suddenly diminished, stripped of his power and arrogance. There was no satisfaction in the sight, only a profound sense of weary finality. I gave the driver the address for Sarah Vance's house in Brookline. Sarah, Richard's younger sister, had always been the quiet, sensible one in the Vance family, maintaining a warm, if sometimes distant, relationship with me over the years, often subtly expressing her own frustration with Richard's ego and their mother's manipulations. She was the only one I trusted. She greeted me at her door with a knowing, worried look. Eleanor, what happened? Claire called me, hysterical. Something about Richard making an announcement. He did, I said, stepping inside her comfortable, book-filled living room. He announced he was leaving me at Claire's graduation party, in front of everyone. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Eleanor, no. That bastard, how could he? He could, I replied, sinking onto her sofa, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving me feeling shaky. But I allowed myself a small, weary smile, pulling the spare copy of the envelope from my purse. I was prepared. I explained everything, the discovery, the prenup, the lawyer, the evidence, handing him the envelope at the party. Sarah listened intently, her initial shock turning into a kind of fierce, protective anger on my behalf. Good for you, Eleanor, she exclaimed when I finished. Good for you. He deserves everything that prenup throws at him after pulling a stunt like that. Later that evening, Claire arrived, having driven straight from the disastrous party, her eyes red-rimmed but furious. Mom, I can't believe Dad. How could he do that to you, to me, on my graduation day? She hugged me tightly. In that moment, the years of feeling overshadowed by Richard's ambition melted away, replaced by a simple, fierce maternal solidarity. We spent the evening together at Sarah's, three women navigating the wreckage left by one man's ego and betrayal, finding strength in each other. The legal process was initiated the next day. Richard, I heard through the grapevine, was reeling, trying desperately to find loopholes, but Clause 14 held firm. The evidence was irrefutable. I felt drained, yes, but also strangely liberated. The script Richard had tried to impose upon me at that party had been flipped entirely. He thought he was ending our story. He had no idea he was just clearing the stage for mine to truly begin. The weeks following Claire's graduation party were a blur of legal proceedings, hushed phone calls, and the quiet, steady support of Richard's sister, Sarah. I stayed with her in her comfortable Brookline home, finding refuge from the storm I had unleashed. Claire joined me there after retrieving her things from the campus dorm, her initial shock replaced by a quiet, fierce loyalty to me and simmering anger towards her father. The divorce itself was, legally speaking, anticlimactic. Richard, faced with the irrefutable evidence presented by Ms. Holloway, Marco the PI's photographs, the credit card statements detailing his affair with Jessica, and the unambiguous Clause 14 of the prenuptial agreement he had championed, had little room to maneuver. His high-powered lawyers postured briefly, threatened challenges, but ultimately recognized the futility of fighting the very clause their client had insisted upon. The settlement adhered strictly to the prenup. The Boston townhouse, now legally unburdened, was mine. The majority of the joint investments and retirement accounts accumulated during our 26 years of marriage were mine. Richard was left with his personal accounts, his significantly diminished share of marital assets, and the professional fallout that was just beginning. Word travels fast in Boston's interconnected professional circles. The story of the dramatic graduation party announcement, coupled with the swift and decisive divorce settlement favoring me due to the infidelity clause, circulated quickly. Richard's carefully crafted image as a brilliant, successful architect began to tarnish. Clients grew wary. Partners at his prestigious firm, I heard through Sarah, distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the whiff of scandal and financial instability. Jessica, the young intern who had hitched her star to his rising trajectory, apparently unhitched it just as quickly once the extent of his financial losses became clear. She quietly left the firm, and, presumably, Richard. His new beginning imploded before it even began. While Richard's world crumbled, I began, slowly, tentatively, to rebuild mine. Moving back into the Boston townhouse felt strange at first. It was filled with ghosts, memories of dinner parties where I played the gracious hostess, echoes of Richard's booming pronouncements about his latest projects, remnants of a life that now felt like a poorly fitting garment. But it was also legally, unequivocally mine. Supported by Claire and Sarah, I started reclaiming the space. We packed away Richard's remaining belongings, his expensive suits, his architectural awards, his collection of single malt scotches, donating most of it. We rearranged furniture, brought in new artwork, pieces I chose this time, filled the rooms with flowers instead of unspoken tensions. Slowly, the house began to feel less like a monument to a failed marriage and more like home. My home. More importantly, I started reclaiming myself. For years, my identity had been subsumed by Richard's ambition. I was Richard Vance's wife, the elegant hostess, the supportive partner who managed the household and social calendar, allowing him the freedom to build his empire. My own earlier career, the art history degree, the years spent passionately building my own small but respected art advisory and curation business before giving it up to raise Claire and support Richard's then struggling firm, felt like a faded photograph from another life. Now, with the unexpected financial security provided by the prenup's ironic twist and the sudden expanse of unstructured time, I found myself drawn back to that world. I started visiting galleries again, not as a social obligation, but with genuine curiosity. I reconnected with old contacts, curators, artists, collectors. I attended lectures, read art journals, immersed myself back into the vibrant, challenging world of contemporary art I had loved so much. An idea began to form. Not reopening a large gallery, I didn't have the energy or inclination for that scale anymore, but something smaller, more focused. Leveraging my eye, my experience, my connections to help others navigate the often intimidating art world. Eleanor Vance Art Advisory. It had a nice ring to it. I rented a small, light filled studio space in the South End, turning it into a combined office and viewing room. I started slowly, taking on a few select clients, young collectors looking to build meaningful collections, businesses wanting to incorporate local art into their spaces, even helping established collectors discreetly deaccession pieces. The work was challenging, demanding, but utterly fulfilling. Using my knowledge, my aesthetic sense, my passion to connect people with art that resonated, it felt like coming home to myself after a long exile. Claire, having graduated into the unexpected aftermath of her parents' divorce, navigated her own path with a quiet strength that made me immensely proud. She landed an assistant curator position at a small contemporary art museum, her art history degree finally being put to use. Our relationship, freed from the distorting influence of Richard and my mother in law's expectations, deepened into an easy, honest friendship between two adult women forging their own paths. We had dinner once a week, visited galleries together, talked openly about the past and the future. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang one evening. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Eleanor? The voice was hesitant, rough, instantly recognizable despite the static. Richard? I paused, gripping the phone slightly tighter. Yes, Richard. I I know you probably don't want to hear from me, he began, stumbling over the words. And I don't expect anything. I needed to say, I'm sorry. A long pause. For everything. For how I ended things. For Jessica. For taking you for granted for so long. I was a fool. An arrogant fool. And I lost everything that mattered. His voice cracked. I just wanted you to know that I know that now. I listened silently, the words washing over me. 6 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago, hearing this might have stirred something. Anger, pity, perhaps even a flicker of vindication. But now I felt surprisingly little. A distant sadness, perhaps, for the wreckage he had made of his own life, for the lost years. But no anger, no desire for reconciliation. That door had closed, firmly, finally. Thank you for saying that, Richard, I said, my voice calm, polite, distant. I appreciate the acknowledgement. Is there is there any chance, Ellie? He asked, his voice hopeful, desperate. For us? To maybe talk? No, Richard, I replied gently but unequivocally. There isn't. That chapter's over. I truly wish you well in finding your own way forward, but my path goes in a different direction now. I heard him take a shaky breath on the other end. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I understand. Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye, Richard. I ended the call and set the phone down, feeling not sadness, but a profound sense of peace. It was truly finished. My business thrived. My relationship with Claire deepened. My friendship with Sarah Vance ironically became one of my closest bonds. I built a new life, one defined not by marital status or social expectations, but by my own passions, my own values, my own quiet strength. Sometimes advising a client on acquiring a bold new piece by an emerging artist, or watching Claire confidently give a gallery talk, I think back to that graduation party, to the woman sitting silently amidst the clinking champagne glasses, holding a secret like a shield. She seems like someone else entirely now. Betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had, in the strangest, most unexpected way, liberated me. Richard thought he was ending my story that day. He had no idea he was just clearing the stage for my real life, the one curated by me to finally begin.